now from La Rosina for the second time. We've got one more of these climbs to go. And I'll tell you what, just as we're having this conversation now, we're talking about UAE Emirates and their strong recruitment. They've just pulled yet another big signing out the bag. And I say big signing, he's not a huge name, but he's a man that has ended this season entertaining us hugely on Italian roads in particular. And you've seen this Dutchman, Sjoerd Baks, who's been racing brilliantly with Alpecin de Koning this year. He won the Coppa Agostoni ahead of none other than Alejandro Valverde, has just been announced as a brand new rider, another brand new rider for UAE Emirates. It's getting like Real Madrid and Barcelona there, isn't it?
It is a little bit. I've lost count. I'm wondering how many riders they now have on their roster. Because they seem to be signing everybody. I mean, if you were to tell me, oh yes, they now have 45 riders signed for 2023, I wouldn't doubt you. It seems like everybody's going to UAE.
Well, of the announced contracts, they have 25 next year now, including Sjoerd Baks. And, of course, riders to come in. Let me have a quick look at who they've signed. Adam Yates is on the way there. Domen Novak, Felix Grossschartner, Tim Wellens, and now Sjoerd Baks. It's a pretty incredible list of riders with, I think, a few renewals yet to be announced as well. So one of the strongest teams in the world already getting stronger. So 65k's to go here. And look what's happened to that gap, Robbie. We were talking about it coming down maybe by 15 seconds on the descent, where it was strong out a heck of a lot more in this group. It's come down by another 30 seconds, 2:15 now. And Alessandro Corvi and the team we were just talking about seem to have this more than in control.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you wouldn't guess that they're going to take twice as much on the descent as they did on the uphill. So they've really pushed things on the way down that descent. Well strung out, everything bunched up back together. Bike exchange, Jayco on the left-hand side in the light blue. And I'm wondering who they're going to be going for today. I would assume on a course like this, probably Kevin Coglioni, the 22-year-old. He's an Italian, so riding a home race, and along with Alexander Konishev, of course, also an Italian, but of Russian descent. His father, Dmitry Konishev, one of the most famous and flamboyant and entertaining riders of the late 80s and early 90s.
And Konishev's at home. He's a Venetian rider as well, born in Verona, just down the road. These are the riders we've been told to watch today by our host broadcasters. Now, I have to bring you some bad news about one of them. Disappointing news if you're trying to follow him. They're giving him 4 stars there. Alessandro De Marchi, we are told, has climbed off his bike. Not quite sure what the issue with, whether it's just no legs end of season. Of course, he's been doing a lot of racing recently, hasn't he? In breakaways or what have you. We haven't been made aware of any crashes or anything. But Alessandro De Marchi has climbed off his bike. And certainly for where I'm sitting, I sincerely hope that it is not the final time we see him riding a bike in professional terms. I know that he's been very public in talking about the fact he doesn't have a contract yet for next year. So all the best to Alessandro De Marchi, and I'm afraid he has climbed off the bike today, and his season ends here. You're watching the final race in Europe. 2022 season has been an absolute cracker, and it's been absolutely lovely to have you with us, Robbie, for the first time here at Discovery Plus, GCN Plus and Eurosport. And just thinking back, what your memories and sort of overall views of the season are.
Well, it's been a fantastic season to join you guys at GCN and Discovery Sports. I've had an absolute ball this season. I mean, it's been a little bit of a blur going 3 Grand Tours back-to-back for the first time in my commentary career. But, I mean, the performances we've seen across the board and just entertaining racing. It seemed to me to be one of the fastest race seasons and most aggressive race seasons I've ever seen. I mean, I hardly saw a stage or any race ridden not to their full capacity. The only one I can really remember, stage 6 of the Giro, was into a headwind on the flat, and there was nothing much going on. Every other day of the season was absolutely flat out, and just magnificent to watch all the year through.
Well, it's been an absolute delight to have your opinion on it, Robbie, and share the races with you. And of course, we look forward to more with the Giro d'Italia presentation coming up in what? Just over 24 hours' time. I'm getting ready for that tomorrow. I'll be talking you through that. You'll all be able to watch that live on the GCN Plus, Discovery Plus, and on Eurosport. Also, it will be free to air on the GCN Racing YouTube channel tomorrow. We'll be looking at the final route for the Giro d'Italia. Most of it, I think, has been released through rumours, but we'll get the final confirmation. And the first Grand Tour of the year will be presented. One thing I think we already know is that there's going to be plenty of time trialling. There's going to be lots of very high mountain passes in contrast to this year. I think at the minute, if the rumours come true, about 7 or 8 passages above 2,000 metres. There should be a stage or two in Switzerland as well. And at the minute, it's either going to end in Trieste or down in Rome, which is the latest big rumour. So the Giro d'Italia presentation tomorrow, Monday night in Europe, just after tea time. If you want to check out the routes, and one man who's not going to be riding the Giro d'Italia, one man as we get to Marostica, very close to his hometown, who hasn't ridden a Grand Tour for 15 years, but who I just spotted in the peloton and who retires today, is 51-year-old Davide Rebellin. 15 years after his 19th and final Grand Tour back in 2008. 6 years after his last monument, of which he rode 46, winning Liège-Bastogne-Liège in 2004. And when he won the Ardennes Triple that year, he told the press he thought he would go on for about 3 more seasons. That was in 2004. A good, 18 years ago. He's ridden for 12 teams throughout his 30-year career, and he's going to end in his 50s. Just to put this into context here, Robbie, he's a month older than both Jens Vogt and Lance Armstrong, and he's still riding. 4/5 of this 112-man peloton who's riding with him in his final race today weren't even born when he rode his first pro race in August 1992. Our very own Sean Kelly had just won, a couple of months previous, his final monument and was still riding on into the next season. In the UK, Rhythm as a Dancer was #1 in the singles charts, and it was the year before the first internet browser, Mosaic, was even invented. So nobody, even had the poshest computer in the world, had any sort of general access to the national internet. And here's a final one. I was still at primary school. There you go. I mean, it's astounding.
Have you finished yet?
Well, I probably could go on. I was told a few others. I was talking to a couple of colleagues about this.
Primary school.
I might get there next year. You never know. I've still a few things to work on, Robin. But I mean, we could dancer. Exactly. We could go on all day.
It's
with
a soul's
things
companion.
Like this.
You can feel it everywhere, Rob.
I think that was on at the primary school disco when I was there, I think. Halloween disco circa 1992. But in all seriousness, he's there in the white and blue jersey. He will have seen a career with more changes, I think, than any other rider in the history of this sport.
Yeah, from, down tube shifters to wireless shifting and everything in between. Just for a start. It is mind-boggling just having a look at those stats that really do put the time and the longevity into perspective. And again, we know he hasn't been racing at the top level in terms of being in World Tour races for the last few years, but he's still been racing as a professional. He's been competitive. So hat off to Davide Rebellin, who retires today. Now here's the next generation, plus another couple of generations at the front. Abramson, Brun, Belleri, Tolzin and Zurlo, who sits at the back in that green and white jersey for Zalf. And we're just inside the final 60 kilometres now, heading up to La Rosina for the third and final time. And that's before we go back to Bassano El Grappa and then return to a brand new loop, a different loop that'll be taken on 3 more times as well.
interesting to see, Robbie, now if the same sort of thing happens with the time gap as it happened last time. I just saw, was it about 3 or 4 minutes back, Trentin was in conversation with young Kasper Andersen down there, who was doing the work at the front for UAE Emirates. Maybe a conversation about what he wanted to happen with the gap, either too much too soon or maybe a bit more.
Yeah, maybe just deciding where they're going to try and split things, take advantage of a little bit of local knowledge, because Matteo Trentin is from around this region. He knows the roads as well as anybody else in this bunch, better. This next climb, we came on air, it's about the width of a, and well, I guess we could call it, hey, it's almost like those round river stones have been thrown into the ground, and that's putting up. It's a really bumpy surface. And I was having a look at some of the photos of the race last year, and quite incredible scenes. I'm really looking forward to this next part of the race as they enter the next phase and onto Latiza.
It looked absolutely brilliant, didn't it, last year, as we've seen our first dropped rider. Looked to be the rider from the General Store team, Tozin, Riccardo Tozin. Dropped, and we're down to 4 at the front now. Tozin, the 24-year-old from Italy. Ridden an Italian programme, as he would have done being on a 3rd division Italian team. Dropped out the back, and the gap continues to come down. Just under 2 minutes now.
So the interesting thing about the next climb, Latiza, that this cobbled climb, if we can call it that, we're just talking about, it's only 330 metres long, but it's quite a drag before it, then a sharp descent, and onto the pave themselves, or the stones. I think it's going to be the descent that is a big factor coming into it. A little sharp one, narrow roads, getting onto that climb, and it's so narrow itself, things are naturally going to spread out across that hill, and being in that front position is going to be absolutely crucial. And you could really just split the field to pieces with one decent attack. 330 metres, not long. You'd almost go full sprint bottom to top and then see where you are. We do expect it to split.
And of course, with Filippo Pozzato's Ronde van Vlaanderen record, no surprise that he searched out a climb like that, so narrow, so thin, with a few cobbles on in this region, to make a classic very much in his image. At the front then, and this is Belleri, who's been going after that King of the Mountains prize. That's the Tudor rider on his wheel, and we're now down to 3. Next rider has dropped, and that will be the Uno X rider Jonas Abrahamsen, out the back here.
Well, good job here from Matteo Zurlo from the Salfiuro Mobile Fjord team. As you said, the most well-known sort of feeder team in Italian cycling. A lot of riders have taken the step up from this team into the professional ranks, and actually one of those is the Australian Gene Bates. He rode for Zalf before turning professional. He's now team director at Bike Exchange Jayco.
I was going to say, that's a name, a blast from the past, isn't it? That's a tremendous, tremendous effort. And he's been sports director for a long, long time as well, hasn't he? Best part of a decade and a half, maybe? Ever since the team started, just before the team started. There's a big connection, isn't there, in Australian cycling with the north of Italy, Robbie? Yeah,
there is. The national road team, as it was then, the under-23 program, they came across under the guidance of Shane Bannon and Brian Stevens, and a lot of the Aussie pros that we talk about now, amongst others, Jai Hindley, Caleb Ewan as well. They've all made their way into the pros via a lot of racing and being based in northern Italy.
Here come the riders up the hill in northern Italy. We've seen an Australian at the front for Lotto, haven't we, for a while? Sweeney's been doing a bit of work. He's been well positioned. See, there's Juul Jensen up there. Ulisi staying nice and close to the front for UAE Emirates. And here comes Liptenschnau, who's the Latvian champion. He's riding for Trek Segafredo. Trek Segafredo, who made a brand new signing yesterday. Nathaniel Tesfatzion, the latest rider to move up from Drono per Androni Giocattoli to the World Tour. Final sighting for this race then for the crowd at the top of La Rosina. Riders will now head back to Bassano del Grappa, finish line town, before beginning the new laps. And look at all those white and red jerseys at the front. UAE Emirates are controlling things here.
There was just a little acceleration about Andreas Kron, but it was just to try and get to his team Soigneur to take a bidon. So I thought we were going to get an attack, but then he just dropped his way back in, signalled his way out to the right, grabbed a drink. So back to normal programming on the front, and Bike Exchange Jayco getting involved. Chris Juul Jensen along with the UAE team, Trek Segafredo. So the big World Tour teams imposing their will. The gap under 2 minutes now with 55 kilometres to go. And we're all going to start thinking about the next phase now as they leave this circuit of La Rosina and head to Latisa. And all thinking about getting in position over that long drag and the steep downhill and into the bottom of that stone-paved wall that they're going to hit.
I keep looking down the back of that peloton as we see the 3 remaining riders in the leader and looking for Vincenzo Nibali in an Astana Kazakhstan jersey. But of course the post-Nibali era began on Wednesday, and the post-Nibali era for Nibali started yesterday, by the way, on the island of Elba. He rode his first mountain bike race since retiring as a road professional. Came 9th. He's talked about wanting to race on the mountain bike and maybe go and do the Cape Epic, which I know a few riders have done in the year after road retirement. Joaquim Purito Rodriguez was one of those recently. Yeah, Nibali yesterday racing on the island of Elba, up against some top mountain bikers, some of the best in the world. In fact, the European champion was there.
Yeah, people shouldn't underestimate what it takes to run a top 10 in a race like that on the mountain bike, especially when you're just coming straight off the road without a lot of preparation for something that's so specific. But talking to the Cape Epic, I've actually been there a couple of times, Rob, and worked on the commentary. And a few years back, I got asked if I'd like to ride it. And I said, oh, I'll have a look at that. I'll think about it. Sounds good. And I checked it out and I said, thanks, but no thanks. It looks a bit too hard. And there's been a number of ex-road professionals who've gone over and ridden. A couple of years ago, as you said, Joaquin Rodriguez rode it. And it's a two-man or two-woman team event, or even, in fact, even a mixed team event. But George Hincapie and Christian Valdevelde rode it as well. And I'd catch up with them on a daily basis, and they said, oh no, what have we got ourselves into? This is so ridiculously hard. George said it was less hard than the year that he rode it with Cadel Evans, when they won the 40-plus Masters division.
Wow. Back to 4 at the front as Abrahamsen returns. He's the rider wearing 133 here, 27-year-old from Norway. Yet to win a pro bike race. His second Italian race of this sort of end-of-season run. And back behind, still Chris Juul Jensen, alongside Alessandro Covi, working just to keep things in check. A couple more Bike Exchange riders move to join the Danish rider who was schooled in Ireland, Juul Jensen. And Davide De Preto comes up to join him, young Italian.
And it does look like they're rallying around Coglioni. He was the man who sort of slotted into the wheels while the rest made their way to the front to contribute to the chase or the pacemaking on the front. So Coglioni looks to be the man that they're all riding for today.
We're talking about riders from Zalvers. We see Rebellin just sitting there taking a drink on the left-hand side. He's the most visible today that he has been in these recent races. Maybe one final attempt to try and do something towards the end of the race. And in this company, it really would take a miracle. But he's still in the bunch. Yeah, we were talking about Zalf a minute ago and riders going to the top level with Australian teams. Davide De Preto, former Zalf rider, moving up to the top level with Bike Exchange.
And that's what we've started to see with, well, for an example is young Australian riders. Their under-23 program is no more, unfortunately, so a whole national team setup is not run like it used to be anymore. But what they have managed to do is create such a presence and reputation in Europe, and particularly in Italy, that there's a number of teams prepared to take young Australian riders. They take them on advice of the high performance program coaches from Australia, and on behalf of Shane Bannon, Brian Stevens, have always been heavily involved with those young riders and in the scene in Italy. So you get a lot of riders who are getting spots on these really well organised and high profile amateur teams in Italy, and that's how they're making their way through to the professional ranks.
And here many of them are, and the final race in Europe as the road season ends for 2022. Just over 50 kilometres remain. Just shy of 2 minutes is the gap. And this is Niels Brun, racing for Tudor Pro Cycling, just 22 years of age. Had some nice experience this year in pro races like Tour de Romandie, the national team. And the Tour de l'Avenir, of course, down that mix of racing at under 23 level and pro racing as well, that is sort of becoming the norm too when you look at the whole scene in general. Professionals winning things younger and younger nowadays. We've seen to, well, stunning effect, hasn't we, in races like the Tour de France in the last few years. Bassano del Grappa is approaching. Peloton approaching it, just 1:55 behind these four riders in the front. Remember, there were five. Riccardo Tosin, the first to be dropped. Abranson, who's there in the yellow and red, back again, shelled on the climb. Final of the three ascents of La Rosina. But it's to Latisa they go next. And then one final climb at what's being called the Diesel Farm. Wait to see what that entails. Again, we think the sponsors are perhaps heavily named with that one. Given a
I
few
didn't know
of
you could farm diesel, but there you go.
Neither did I. Certainly the clothing type. I've seen quite a few sweaters with the brand across the front amongst the organisers today. And it's fitting, isn't it? This is a Filippo Pozzato race. Of course he's got to have designer clothing for all the volunteers and workers on the event. It wouldn't be a Pozzato race without that.
Probably a few man bags around as well. Well, off to the climb of Latisa next. Rob, 330 metres. The height difference from bottom to top is 50 metres. It's got a maximum gradient of 20% and an average of just over 15%. So it is a wall.
Oh, we've seen a few Flemish flags around, haven't we? A line of Flanders was being waved a moment ago, so it's sort of a fast forward to spring, and it'll be here before you all know it.
There's a familiar face. Well, what you can see of it, Geoffroy Soup, the man with the beard from Total Energie, experienced Frenchman, and doing his bit. And, well, looking at their team list for this afternoon, I would think that Alexis Villemors might be their best hope, the 34-year-old Frenchman. He's been a winner of stage in the Tour de France. Yep, he's riding quite well. Remember his stage victory in the Tour, I think it was 2015 when he won on the Mur de Bretagne. He jumped away on the steeper section and held everybody off. So this is a sort of parcours that could really suit him as well.
He's ridden an entirely Italian programme, really, since the start of September. Ridden all of the semi-classics and, of course, the Giro di Lombardia as well. Podium place in Gran Piemonte just a couple of days before the Giro di Lombardia. A race that ended up in that very strange sprint that was won by Ivan Garcia Cortina. And the company he was in, that was a sensational result, really, for Guglielmo, not known for his bunch sprinting capabilities.
Yeah, not slow, but not a man for the big bunch sprints. And of course, on that day, won by Cortina, who has acquitted himself well amongst the best of the best sprinters. But it was quite a thinned out bunch. They got rid of some of the real fast men, and it was a bit of a race of attrition with the puncheurs left over.
You're looking down on Marostica here. The old industrial heritage still on show, plus the even older heritage, the walls of the city. Peloton flying past. Zurlo still going. This now is Belleri. One minute 50. They're holding fairly well right now, but of course these climbs to come. First rider to be caught again, Riccardo Tosin. Reabsorbed by what's left of this peloton. Started out with the small bunch anyway, 112 riders today. Just a few, remember. We're told that Alessandro De Marchi has climbed off. And there's the Astana Kazakhstan team on the right-hand side. Won this race last year with Samuele Battistella. Got a couple of interesting riders to look out for today, the likes of Simone Velasco, Miguel Angel Lopez, of course. Always aggressive even when it's not really his terrain, and imagine he'll be trying something. He's been doing all the gravel racing as well in the last few weeks.
He was the first attacker in the Gravel World Championship.
He was, up the first hill, wasn't he?
A week ago.
He wasted no time. Interesting to know where his career goes from here.
He's quite the enigma, isn't he, Miguel Angel Lopez?
By the way, if you're still wondering about the exit and Movistar and all that last year, the brand new series of the Movistar documentary has been out on Netflix recently. If you want to watch that, make sure you can, because that is quite the watch. Very, very revealing indeed.
Yeah, it is a good watch. I mean, I started watching it in August when I actually got home from overseas off the back of 2 Grand Tours back to back, and I got home and I started watching a cycling documentary. It was really interesting. Even when you have been in a professional team and you know what goes on behind the scenes and all the machinations of a pro team, but to watch that and how they went through the season and the different personalities and the ups and downs, and it was a really interesting watch. I liked it.
On to Latisa circuit we come, and this is the circuit that's 12 kilometres long, again to be taken on 3 occasions before we go and take on our final climb up the Diesel Farm. And as you can see, it's not just on the cobbled climb itself where things happen. We've got up and down road. There's almost 3,000 metres of climbing across the Roche today.
Yeah, it's the climb before the climb. We talk about Latisa, the 330-metre paved wall that they're going to take on and they have to tackle. But this section here is quite the climb in itself, although it's not categorised. We don't have all the information on it in terms of profile, but it certainly drags up for a couple of kilometres before they dive down onto the foot of the stones.
And it's still the man who's leading the King of the Mountains competition, Belleri, who's pulling things along at the front for the BS Carrera team. This race behind those heating up. 1:37 now. Shaved another 15 seconds of it. You can see why. They're just racing. It's not quite the hugely aggressive Flemish racing sort of thing for every corner, but there was a little hint of that there, Robbie, wasn't there? Just for that right-hand corner.
Yeah, a little hint of it you see as they spear into that corner and then heavy on the brakes further back in the peloton and almost to a standstill. But it's the warm-up for when it really counts, when they get over the top of this hill, tackle the descent, and then onto that incredibly narrow cobbled road. And that's where we're going to see a real rush to be in position. But the strongest will come to the fore when you've got a drag like they have before you dive down to the climb. It's a lot easier for the strongest riders to get in position. Less luck involved. You just ride a bit harder on the climb and find yourself in the right spot.
Here's that big race into it. Abramson just retakes it up at the front. Zorlo sitting at the back here. He's one of the 3 breakaway survivors on Wednesday at the Giro del Veneto and went on to fight for the race. Won in the end by Matteo Trentin. Really aggressive races. Most of these Italian semi-classics are towards the end of the year. Bunch continues to fight for those positions. Roads narrow, they widen. Left and right, up and down. 1.5 minutes now. And just over 44 kilometres to the conclusion of the final European road race of the season. Whilst we've got you here, a reminder that there's a couple of days racing still to go on the Tour of Langkawi, the last stage race of the season. You can see those live or on demand on GCN Plus and Discovery Plus. Also, today's the final day of the Track World Championships. If you've missed any of that, you can catch up on demand. A reminder that tomorrow on our subscriber platforms and free on the GCN Racing YouTube channel, you have the Giro d'Italia presentation. We'll know the first Grand Tour route of the season before you can forget about road racing for a couple of months. But the cyclocross is on. We've got the UCI Champions League track coming up. There's plenty to entertain you for the next 2 or 3 months before we return with the road racing. Bit of looking around here from Baleri. You can see all the police motorbikes screaming past him, of course, with the very narrow stuff that's coming. And you never know what might happen behind, how quickly this can come together. Organisers will be wanting to make sure that most of the traffic's out the way.
Yeah, Rob, I think even we usually see when they have about 30 seconds, we see all the vehicles come out, but I think it'd be a lot safer if when it gets to a minute, they have a mass exodus from behind all those race vehicles, because it can happen so quickly as this peloton's going to be really turning up the heat on the race towards that climb of Latiza. And as we see, the pace is already on. We talked about the strongest riders just by default being in the best position because they can just ride harder on the climb. We're seeing riders go out the back of this peloton under the impetus of UAE, and they're really winding up the pace with Formolo.
Yeah, Formolo at the front. Just sitting behind him was Matteo Trentin. And the pace being put on the front now being reflected in the gap. 1:26 continues to fall.
Well, for obvious reasons, we talk a lot about Matteo Trentin. He's coming off the back of the win of the Giro di Trentino, Veneto, my excuses. But another man in that team who always seems to get under the radar and just sort of do his own thing is Diego Ulissi. He's always there, and he played a big role in the win of Trentin as well when the group split. And he's a guy, he rides a bit like a sniper. He's always there and thereabouts. You sort of don't see him as they hit the bottom of this climb, and look at those stones.
Onto Latiza, 330 metres long. You can see average gradient at 15%. Yes, average gradient at 15%. Maximum at 20%. Another rider shelled, and that is Abramson for the second time.
And just in case you're wondering, you've just tuned in. No, we are not in Belgium. We're in the Veneto region of Italy. But this race organised by Filippo Pozzato, he has found a hill that, harks back to his love of the Flemish classics.
Here is the race into the Koppenberg. Latiza. As the first few riders hit it at the bottom, and look at what's happened to the gap. Just 20 seconds disappearing into thin air like that. And it's
Mark Hirschi here on the front, along with Formolo, Matteo Trentin, and ladies and gentlemen, this is not a teaser. This is the real thing.
It certainly is, and everyone's fighting to be at the front. See the different climbing styles, and just look, it's under the trees there. You can imagine that this time of year the dew's going to be under. It's going to be slightly damp on those cobbles as well. Not easy as they come off of the cobbles onto the gravel very briefly. At the top of Latisa, we have 2 left at the front of the race, but look what's happened to the gap.
I mean, it's dropping all the time. I was about to say 29, and then it was 25. And, yeah, the pressure just continues to be applied by UAE, and this is really going to split the peloton.
You could just see, in fact, instead of the 2 riders we saw, there was 1 rider further ahead, and that was Matteo Zurlo, who seemed to have made the move over the top. This now is Formolo. Trentin can follow. Lopez is trying to do the same, third wheel behind, and a couple of other Astana jerseys follow him.
Trentin with a little look over the shoulder, and he continues to try and pedal his way across to his teammate. Well, they've picked up the man from Uno X. That's Abrahamsen, dropped out of that breakaway, and that now for the last time. It just tacks onto the back of Formolo. So there's going to be 2 from UAE, 2 from Astana. So Lopez, and who's the other one going to be? Another little group coming across as well.
And imagine they've got to do that 3 times as well. So 3 circuits of Latisa. Formolo's pushing on here. This is sort of a carbon cutout, isn't it, of what UAE Emirates have been doing in each and every one of these semi-classics in northern Italy. Amassing their bodies at the front, breaking up the race nice and early, and making sure it's really aggressive. And there aren't too many survivors at the end of it.
No, it's how they started the season as well with the Italian semi-classics. Right at the beginning of the season, they were doing exactly the same thing, massing at the front, splitting the race to pieces, going to the finish with actually sometimes just 3 of them and taking the complete podium.
Well, Lopez has company with 1 teammate. There was the man they call Roccia, who is Formolo on his wheel, and now the rest of the bunch returns. These 2 trying to make it up to Zurlo, and we will have 3 together at the front again, but their gap will be less than half a minute. Absolutely destroyed on that first passage of Latisa. Not too much opportunity to sort of gather your thoughts and regain yourself here. It's only 12 kilometres long, this circuit. And once you've got 1 passage out the way, you're on the descent, you're already approaching the next one. Battle of mere survival here. One that they're not really winning. That's no surprise. There's another car, gets pulled out the gap. 18 seconds. Zurlo in the green there, and red and white. In the white you can see Belleri, and then Niels Brun, who's in the black here. Yet to get a good view of the peloton from up on high to see exactly how much it's been thinned down, but I'd be very surprised now, Robbie, if it was anywhere near as big as what we saw approaching that last climb.
Yeah, well, when you just saw them coming into the climb, I was thinking something around 20. It looks more like 30 riders with a few more coming across. So a lot of riders scrambling to get themselves back on terms. But, I mean, this just after 1 climb of Latisa. And there'll be a few who are at the end of their tether. They've used the best of their forces just to get into this front group now. So with another 2 climbs over that cobbled section, it's just going to thin out even more, and we'll start to figure out who's got the numbers in the group, apart from UAE and Astana, to really make something of that and start to make this race tactical, start throwing out some attacks, maybe even in between climbs.
You can see at least 3 riders from Astana. There's one from Eolo Cometa in there. And then remaining there for Alpecin de Koning was Nicola Conci, who was involved in the shake-up the other day, the Italian, for the Belgian team. 9 seconds. Another motorbike whizzes past. And there's a nasty, disappointed look behind there from Zurlo.
Well, it was a matter of time, but maybe that time has come a little bit earlier than they anticipated themselves. I mean, the pace went on so hard by UAE, led by Davide Formolo, and it was still over a minute near the top of the climb before they took that descent and onto the climb of Letiza. It just melted so quickly with that violent acceleration.
So Ulisi Trentin Formolo still at the front for UAE. Looking around, and Goldstein remains for Israel Premier Tech. Gavazzi is there for Eolo Cometa, as is Samuel Erivi.
Two riders there from Bike Exchange Jayco. Plenty of looking around. Everyone's sort of thinking, so, well, I've made the group, I've made the important split. There's a massive gap back to the rest of the field, and no reason to ride on this section of road just yet. I mean, the brake's just hovering, only just in front at 7 seconds, and everyone seemed content to just leave it up to UAE.
I just spotted a man from your neck of the woods. Jay Vine up there, and not far away from the front for Alpecin de Koning.
It's good to see him finishing the season off strongly with a lot of motivation after that massive disappointment crashing out of La Vuelta when he looked set to win the King of the Mountains jersey. He had his hands full with Richard Carapaz, of course, but at Vine, he'd been looking so strong. Of course, winning 2 mountaintop finishes, but he sustained a pretty nasty cut to his arm and a damaged wrist, but he's bounced back strongly and is finishing off the season well.
Still part of the group chasing this trio. Trio being led by 24-year-old Matteo Zurlo. Flicks his elbow. That means Michael Balleri comes through. Niels Brun, the only non-Italian in this trio, is there in the black jersey for the Tudor team.
And Brun showing the signs of a little tumble somewhere, I'd imagine, the last few days, possibly in the gravel race a couple of days ago, if he also started that alongside his teammate Robin Froidevoix, who was the winner of the Serenissima gravel race. Haven't spotted him so far today, so maybe either the hills a little bit too much, or maybe the effects of winning that gravel race a couple of days ago still hanging in the legs of the young Swiss, just 23 years old.
He would be easy enough to spot from here, wouldn't he, more or less, because he's got the national champions jersey on, the red jersey with a white cross on the front, and he's certainly not amongst the first 20-30 riders there. So the breakaway's done. 37 kilometres remain. Alpecin de Koning move to the front. UAE Emirates have a rider in there. There's presence too from Israel Premier Tech, from Astana, Kazakhstan. And I wonder if Nathanael Tesfatzion can do something to leave a parting gift for Gianni Savio and Dronoper. He's sitting in about 6th to 7th wheel. One long line here. Alpecin de Koning making it difficult. We saw Vine moving to the front. Aha. Lippens is still in there, isn't he, for Israel, for Trek Segafredo, pardon me. Conchi sits a bit further down for Alpecin.
Well, there is Tesfatzion, sitting in about 5th wheel. 6th, actually.
Here's Formolo. Just behind him, Christian Sgaroni.
Sepp van Mark put himself into 3rd wheel at the moment.
It's good to see Van Marke racing towards the end of the year. Vine's just going to go into sit into about 5th place again in the blue jersey. Opportunity for the entire UAE team to move up now, and they've got 5 riders still towards the front here.
Haven't seen much of Sepp van Mark since his victory in the Maryland Classic. What was that, around a month ago now? He won that from a break, a small sprint of about 5 riders. Van
Marke just sitting behind Davide Formolo there, and next to Nathanael Tesfatzion. There's Enrico Battaglin over on the left-hand side, sitting in about 5th place, purple jersey. And Alexis Vouillamot moved up into about 10th place. this now, yet again, is Alessandro Corvi. What a season he's had. He christened it, what was it, the Passo Fejaya back in the day? He was the winner on that day.
The Fejaya. Yeah, he was the forgotten man of the day a little bit, unfortunately, for Corvi. I mean, not for himself and his team, his family, his fans, and for followers of the Giro. But, of course, it was the day where Jai Hindley rode himself into the pink jersey and dropped Richard Carapaz.
It was the day that
Corvi was up the road winning the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zulo at the back after being absorbed, just trying to hang on. Well, it's a big task in itself after giving everything. Cofidis have Eddie Finet there in the red and white jersey. And this is all that's left of the race. 35 kilometres to go, heading to the second ascent up Latiza. What's the sort of order of the day for this next ascent? More of the same, whittle it down a bit more, or are we going to see maybe an attack to really split it?
Well, just seeing the nature of the roads on this lap, they're relatively flat apart from the approach to the climb and the climb itself. The rest is really flat. I'm not sure you'd want to go with too far to go, so be in control. Make sure you don't miss a split. Make sure you're always in the front part of that peloton. But I think that maybe the last time over Latiza would be the time to really go full gas. And once you're over the top, commit 100% and go into that final sort of 20 kilometres of the race, really ripping things apart. Long range one from here, but a danger to go with so much flat road around this circuit, around sort of 9 kilometres on the flat, and there's still quite a few teams with numbers in this group. So I think maybe better, and could be the thinking with this many riders from UAE, to just sort of hold the status quo for another lap before really ripping into it.
Italian champion Filippo Zana still in the group as well. National jersey on his back. Had a real breakthrough year as the man who's been around for a while. We've seen him riding 3 different Giri d'Italia. Not too much apart from the odd breakaway, but this year's had a fantastic race, fantastic season, hasn't he? Won the national title on that one day down in the south of Italy, and of course was the GC winner at the Adriatic-Ionica race. 23 years of age and heading for the World Tour for the next 3 seasons.
So the tactic here for UAE could be just quite like they did on the last time around. Just hold that front position, to ride a strong pace on this drag up before they hit that sharp descent. And if you can put yourself on the front and leading onto that cobbled climb, everybody's got to ride hard up it. But if you're in the front, ride hard, you put everybody under pressure, you can split things. Over the top, you can choose what you do, then everybody's going into the red, scrambling, trying to get back. So just being at the front, by default, you're going to do a lot of damage.
Eolo Cometa trying to do a little bit of damage here. Haven't had an amazing season in terms of wins, have they? Just 3 wins all year.
Oops.
Now then, problems on the left-hand side, and a rider down. I wonder if that was Miguel Angel Lopez. I think it was, because the Astana Kazakhstan riders are waiting. Yep.
Yep.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, you've seen the fight for position as they came up that climb. They're trying to hit the descent at the front, as UAE's now come back to the front and taken control again from Eolo Cometa. Is it? Well, not a replay of the crash, of the same pitch we saw just before. And you just imagine that, as they came into that corner, the squeeze goes on, a touch of wheels, maybe a locking up of handlebars, and down you go. So day done for Lopez, if in fact that was him, and we assume it is with the number of teammates who are waiting for him.
The very brief shot of his face, it seemed to be him as well. I would certainly put an educated guess down. Again, the presence of the 2 teammates tells you a lot, doesn't it? Miguel Angel Lopez crashing in the Veneto Classic.
And it split the bunch too, that. I mean, the touch of brakes, the swerving to get it around that fallen rider. And there's probably at least a dozen riders gone off the back of this group, as they're really in that now fight into these really narrow roads and onto the bottom of the cobble climb, and here it comes.
And it's Matteo Trentin who is leading in there. You can see Mark Hirschi just behind him, then Diego Ulissi. You've also got Davide Formolo, 4 riders of the 5 we had until a moment ago. Corvi was the other. And Andersen is the young Dane who'd done plenty of work so far until now.
Wants a bit of room, Trentin, waving the motorbike forward. So I'm going to descend faster than you can. So you're going to have to give me a little bit of room. In fact, they're not yet onto the cobbled climb. My mistake. Still a little bit of descending to go before they swing onto the stones for the second time on Letizia. Maximum gradient, 20%.
And look at that. No wonder everybody was fighting for that position there, because you're going to go onto it first here, have that opportunity, and look at how long and strung out. It just shows the importance of the positioning into the bottom of it, Robbie.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're halfway in the bunch. You're already 12 seconds behind the front of the race. So it's a free head start if you're able to get the position over that drag uphill that they've just done. Use it to your advantage on the descent. Those motorbikes are getting in the way of Matteo Trentin, trying to push things along, string things out. And this is the sort of acceleration that is the prelude to splitting the bunch once they get onto the stones. It makes it really quite easy when you're already taking 12, 15 seconds on a strung out peloton. It doesn't take much for it to split further, come over the top, and you've got the rest of the peloton at 6s and 7s.
Here's the back of what's left of the peloton.
It was interesting to see Trentin, the man being the one to do the riding on the front. Okay, it was mostly downhill where he was riding, but if they were riding for Matteo Trentin, you would expect they're going to be having him sit behind. Again, blocked again a little bit by that moto as they're back onto Letizia for the second time. Van Marke coming through, third position. Yep.
Sepp Van Marke just behind, and it's Trentin who again just, I think, had to brake there a little with the motorbike just in his way.
Hirschi with him.
This is Letizia. Remember, just 330 metres long. Here's the vital stats for you. Maximum gradient, 20%. Average at 15%.
And is that Jay Vine coming through? No.
Vine and Conchi, I think. Vine just
Conchi
behind.
is the. So the first Alpecin König rider is Conchi. But Jay Vine is there. But Conchi looking really comfortable on the stones. Good technique. Front wheel just bouncing a little bit, nice and controlled but soft grip on the bars. That's essential when you're on the stones. Let the front wheel of the bike just play its way across the stones. Don't grip it and rip it too hard. Just let it do what it needs to do. Steer your way across.
There's one rider in there from the 3rd Division team who's having a fantastic race, I think. The General Store team, green jersey up there. As we see riders from Alpecin König. Now Oldani's up there with Conchi this time. This is Conchi at the front. Oldani sits in 3rd wheel. We know that Vine had been up there, but it is Stefano Oldani now who's up there in 3rd place. Of course, stage winner in the Giro d'Italia in Genoa this year. I'll look around to see the latest bit of damage done and communication. Trentin communicating damage, and it looks as though there's an issue for the rider wearing number 122, who's Paul Orsolin. Mechanical or legs, or both. Liebensch out at the back now. 76 for Alpecin König is Jimmy Janssens.
Job done for Janssens, and they've got 2 riders up the front there, as you said, Conchi and Oldani, and going through, contributing to the pace setting on the front. Plenty of riders from UAE. I think they're still there with at least 3, possibly 4 riders. And there you go, 3 in the first 6 at the moment. Makes sense when you saw the way they came onto the climb, stringing things out in the descent, and they almost had half the bunch dropped before they even hit the stones. That's Mark Hirschi, the 3rd of them. Formula, number 4. He's the man in 3rd position.
Matthias Vacek is up there for Trek Segafredo. Well, if you remember him from the start of the season, weren't you? And that race when he was racing for the then Gazprom team in the UAE Tour. He won from the breakaway. Just 20 years of age. Signed for Trek Segafredo now, and he's performing very admirably up the front.
they're great to see him picked up by Trek Segafredo after winning that stage in UAE, and then as we know, everything that happened with Russian sports people and teams being shut out, and of course Vacek was a member of that Russian Gazprom team, but he's from the Czech Republic.
Now then, I mentioned there was a rider in the green jersey there for the General Store SGB team. He's a 19-year-old, and he's riding on the home roads. I'm talking about young Francesco Busato there on the left-hand side, the centre of your picture. He is in esteemed company. He's about to turn professional with the Intermarché team next year. Again, 19, and this race finishes in his hometown. Now, what a story that would be. Bassano del Grappa he's from. The other week he was riding the under-23 version of the Giro di Lombardia, the Piccolo Lombardia, where he came 5th. He's been riding the under-23 Giro this year, where he got a couple of stage podiums. This, though, is a different level. This is the different game. This is one of the performances of his young career so far, just to be in this company.
Yeah, great to see a young rider like that, 19. Although we've become accustomed to 19, 20-year-olds winning plenty of races now in the World Tour and, in fact, in Grand Tours. But very good to see a young rider like that who's about to make his pro debut next year and already mixing it up with World Tour professionals in the final race of the season.
Now, a World Tour former professional is pulling this group that includes Davide Rebellin back to the front. Not a bad performance at 51 years of age to be in the second chasing group as the race goes into its finale here. The former World Tour professional I was talking about was Andrea Garosio, racing for the 3rd Division Biese Carrera right now. He's the man in the white jersey trying to bring this back together. And the man riding at the front here on the radio, the 19-year-old on home roads, about to become a fully fledged pro next year on World Tour.
If I was his team director, I'd be saying just settle down a little bit, stay calm in this group. There's a lot of riders here who should be taking more responsibility than yourself, so you can save your legs a little bit. Try and go under the radar despite riding in that iridescent green. Take a little bit of a back seat in the group, let the others take care of doing the work. He's there on his own from his team, of course. So lean on the bigger teams. There's 2 from Cofidis. Remy Rojas is the first man of those 2 here in second position. He was in the sprint for the win a couple of days ago in the Giro de Veneto.
Yeah, he attacked inside the final 500 metres or so, and in the end it was a bit of a lead-out for Matteo Trentin, but in doing so he did assure himself as a second place, and maybe didn't feel he was in with the prayer of winning the sprint if he'd left it, so fair enough. And so you're talking about the numbers in this group, Robbie. That's 4 riders from UAE Emirates. It's got to be down to them here.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they've been taking control the entire race. They've had the pressure on, and they've been the team that's been splitting things up and dictating how this race is playing out. It depends how now they want to use these numbers, as we see now. Little split at the front.
It's Trentin again.
Which of them is it?
Looks to be Matteo Trentin again, I think. We'll just double-check that.
It looks like the more solid figure of Trentin.
There he is.
Yeah.
Again, the second group that includes the retiring Davide Rebellin, just a few seconds behind that car. But again, struggling to get organised, and already, you have to say, with one more ascent of Latisa to come, then the Diesel Farm climb. Sponsors climb. That, of course, you would say that if you're not as strong on that first group, then you're not going to get back in, as Formolo makes an acceleration and Vermeers looks to follow him.
Yeah, so UAE already trying to use the numbers and go on the attack on the flatter section of this circuit with one more climb of Latisa left to come. So instead of just taking responsibility and just riding on the front, using their numbers to go on the attack, but they're going to have to be careful with who they take up the road. And Formolo, if he was in fact to get away in the company of Vermeers, then he would be a beaten man at the finish if they were sprinted out for the win.
The next group is coming back. So it's going to be a slightly bigger group now. And we've got Hirschi coming across, so again there'll be decent numbers. Oldani, I think, coming here for Alpecin de Koning. There's a rider from Astana, Kazakhstan, who I think is the final rider involved, actually, for that team. given the crash and then waiting up behind from Lopez and company. Florian Vermeers is the other rider. He's in the red jersey here. Trek Segafredo with one rider thinking about leading the chase behind. Danny trying to do all he can to pull this across, but Formolo's strong.
And here she, and getting the free ride across in the wheels. Marked the move well. The Swiss from UAE.
Christian Sgaroni is the rider from Astana, Kazakhstan. And Remy Rochas, the rider you talked about just then, he's the rider from the French team. Cofidis there in the red and white. And we have a group of 6 riders at the front of the Veneto Classic. Just under 25 kilometres to go. A man looking to try and find the form that saw him finish second in Paris-Roubaix 18 months ago. Good in the gravel race at Serenissima Gravel the other day. Top 20 Paris Tour as well. Came for his first Tour de France this year. And still only 23, the man from Kent. Now then, counter-attacks from behind. It looks as though Trek Segafredo want to be involved.
It looks like it is the white jersey of the Trek Segafredo team, splintering behind. And Matteo Trentin, he's making sure he's marking everything, all these counter-attacks, trying to just slide his way across, get a free ride. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to blast his way across to the group with 2 teammates, or just takes a back seat and just marks everything else. Tries to shut things down. 17 seconds for this 6-man group. Formolo, Hirschi, Scaroni, Florian Vermeers, Remy Rochas and Stefano Oldani. This is Scaroni.
Scaroni, the 25-year-old Italian from Brescia, so he's not too far from home either. Another of those riders that was picked up from Gazprom, as it's Gebre'Gzabiher who's trying to get across from Trek Segafredo. Turned into a really solid bike rider, hasn't he, the Eritrean, last couple of years.
He has, and he's going to get his countryman for company next season in Nathanael Tesfatzion from Drone Hopper. There is one Drone Hopper on the back of this group. It's not Tesfatzion.
There were 2 riders left. I think Ravanelli might have been the other rider left. Certainly on recent form, it'd be going that way. Wait to take a check on that and get a better look. But it was the 28-year-old Manuel Gebre'Gzabiher driving things along, the former national champion on road and time trial.
Oldani just missing a turn now, as they're still rolling turns on this uphill drag. Oldani just at the back and just swung across and to the last wheel instead of following the train through. But for me, she's straight onto it. He says, no, not with me. I'll go into last position. I'll make sure you move. I'll chase you through.
2 former teammates, those guys as well. Rode together at Lotto Soudal very briefly.
Yeah, well, Vermeer, she'll realise, he'll know with Oldani, I can't afford to give you too much rest and let you stay fresh and take us to the finish, because I know how rapid you are.
Still Gebre'Gzabiher here. 17 seconds the difference. As we look back to the front, this is the group they're chasing, 6 of them. 22.5 kilometres to go. Remy Rochas, who's finishing the season really strongly, up there alongside a whole team that's finishing strongly, UAE Emirates. Mind you, they started solidly, didn't they? And they went on in the middle of the year quite solidly as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, strong start, strong middle, strong finish. Yeah, it's been a super season by UAE, despite Tadej Pogačar not winning the Tour de France this year. Still an incredibly strong season by the team all round.
He did everything but win, didn't he, as well in that Tour? He won stages, he was aggressive. I don't think there's anything that they can look back and regret too much on. Of course, winning in monuments as well, and you have to remember that he was unable to start in Liège, Pogačar, given the bereavement in his family at the time. on Lombardy in fantastic fashion ahead of Emmerich Mas. Now then, Rochas at the front, just trying to drive this on, seeing if they can shed a bit of that dead wood. And Vermeers looked like he was losing the wheel there.
Yeah, with that gap just at 13 seconds, so the impetus went out of this group just a little bit. So Remy Rojas is trying to get himself in the front position. I think they're just about to hit that descent, and we saw how important that was last time through. Even the gap between first and 10th was 3 or 4 seconds, and if you can just get that clean run onto the stones of Latisa, you can really have the pressure on the rest of the group. It's a free head start.
Well, Gebreigzabiher is done, and another Trek Segafredo rider moves to the front to work.
And still the same man in second wheel, Matteo Trentin, just marking every move, being the watchdog. So my two teammates up the front, and I'm going to just try and block everything down from gaining any momentum. 12 seconds, so they are narrowing the gap.
If someone's really strong in this second group, is that bridgeable on that climb?
I think it is. I think 12 seconds is certainly bridgeable, 330 metres, but if you can really get a good run on, as I said before, get a clear run onto the bottom, really carry some momentum through that sort of little S-bend that takes you onto Latisa, yep, you could get across that. I'll be interested to see if Trentin goes himself, or if somebody else really tries to get themselves across, and he can just ride the wheel, pace himself off someone else making a counter-attack. And I wouldn't put it past him just using anybody else up and then getting himself across solo and joining his teammates in the front.
So coming up to this final ascent then of Latisa, and then of course we've got that next climb, a diesel farm climb just before the finish.
It's Hirschi on the front, which is probably the best idea, seeing that Davide Formolo is not the most confident or most rapid descender. You see him just there in fourth position, losing a few metres, is getting a bit of a guide on the corners from the rest. Remy Rojas just missing one of the corners a little bit. Gap opens up in front of him to Oldani. Hirschi, a very competent descender.
Just 20 kilometres to go now.
Oops, for Oldani, just off the edge, a little bit like we saw Mate Mohoric on the descent of the Poggio back in March in Milano-San Remo. Just a little bit wide, down into the gutter, hop back up over the edge of the bitumen, and back in position.
Oh, we keep looking, we keep watching. 15 seconds. Oldani in that second position. Rochas just there. He sits in the red and white. And we're not too far now from our final ascent of Latisa. 15 seconds. Formolo, Hirschi, Scaroni, Vermeers, Rochas and Oldani. Here comes Formolo, just moving into a better position, finding the wheel of his teammate, but it's that fight for the position now as they're heading on to the stones for the final time. Here we go. 330 metres against the gradient and what's underneath. Behind a slightly higher group and a bigger number of a group are heading into what is the final ascent of Latisa. But the climbing's not done here. They'll go to the diesel farm slightly longer after this off-road climb and descent. But for now, it's UAE who are trying to build their gap here. And it's Davide Formolo who's putting as much power and pace through the pedal as possible. And look who's trying to come over behind. It's the teammate, Trentin, wants to be involved as well.
Well, I'm glad he's doing that, because I flagged that he might. And it's a typical Trentin move to then block everything down, follow the moves. But when he gets the opportunity and he's taking nobody with him, he's astute enough to know that he can gap them with his sprint power, and he's not dragging anybody across. I mean, there are going to be a number of other riders that sort of try and reach as well and follow Trentin across, but he's already got across it in the first half of the climb. Just see how many others are able to follow that lead and also bridge the gap.
There was one rider coming across from Trek Segafredo as There's a quick look down, maybe slight quick dropping of the chain there from Davide Formolo, who makes sure he's all present and correct as he comes off. There was 6 at the front before. There's going to be at least 7 now because Trentin was coming across. There was another rider from Trek Segafredo. There is Trentin just at the back. There's the rider from Trek Segafredo, and then a gap to the next rider from Lotto Soudal.
So that must be, I would imagine, Andreas Kron from Lotto Soudal. He would be the most likely, I would think, from that team to come and join his teammate Vermeersch in the front, which would then give us 3 from UAE, 2 from Lotto Soudal. This is Trentin, still trying to just bridge the rest of that gap.
Absolutely fantastic form he's in. It's this quick descent now, and the next section of the race is the approach into the final section, where we have the Diesel Fawn climb and descent off-road. 1.3 kilometres at 9.6% as Trentin makes contact. For now there are 7. There's going to be 8 or 9, I imagine. Here they go. Here is the 8th and the 9th riders. So 9 at the front, 18 Ks to go. Constantly evolving situation in this Veneto Classic. Highly entertaining race, but now we head to the final chapter, Robbie.
Yep, the last climb of the day, the Diesel Farm, and I'm looking forward to this. So we've had the pavé, or what passes for it, those rounded stones, and then there's a whole mixture of stones on that climb, and incredibly narrow. They've negotiated that 3 times, and now we've got the off-road. A bit of gravel thrown in, and what race worth its salt doesn't have a bit of gravel in it these days? It is Andreas Kron, number 33 from Lotto Soudal, who's made it across. And from Trek Segafredo, number 26 is Matthias Vacek, the man we spoke about before, the transfer during the season from the Gazprom team across to Trek Segafredo, a winner of a stage in the UAE Tour. Here he is.
He's having a really good end to the season. Of course, just as he had that excellent start to the season, still only 20 years of age as well. Now then, here we go. Oh, wow. More arriving. Bike Exchange is suddenly involved. And the young rider we talked about from the team we hardly see on our screens. I keep having to look down for the full name. General Store SGB. And it's the young Francesco Busato in the green jersey right at the back there. Ulissi joins, so now that's 4 from UAE. And again, even as we were talking about the evolving situation, it evolves again.
Yeah, there he is, number 2. Ulissi on the back of the group here. Bike Exchange is Kevin Coglioni, the man we said most likely to be the team leader today for Bike Exchange, Jayco. Second last position. There is young Busato. And a big chase group also coming from behind. So it looks like they're going to get back on terms, and we're going to, it looks like, I think, swell to something around 25 riders that'll come together at the head of the race. As long as they keep pushing on and close the gap, but they were quite close behind.
There's a lot
We're just
looking
going to pan
around
back and get a
there.
look at that group, which, yep, there they are. They are going to make it. And does it have Davide Rebellin in the group?
Well, I think Fonmarca is at the back of the group. That would mean there's no Rebellin, but he was very much in contact until the last few kilometres, wasn't he? This is the next group coming back. The Italian champion Zana is there. In fact, it's not Fonmarca, it's the former Israeli champion, actually, who's there for Israel Premier Tech, and that is Omer Goldstein, who's a really fast finisher. Vujamo gets back in as well. And there's one rider from Euro Cometa as we look to Zana. So this is the situation, heading to the Diesel Farm. Of course, Italian fashion brand that became famous the world over, one of the sponsors of this race. It's from this region. So I imagine we're going close to the headquarters. I imagine that's the reason for the name, but we'll get a good look when we get there. Looking down that road, can't see any more groups about to make contact yet.
Corona Vermeersch, pretty keen to work within the group as well. Aldani, Coglioni. And then a bit of looking around behind. Diego Ulissi is the man out of the saddle from UAE.
Let's see what teams with not so many numbers do here. Who does the work and who doesn't? Who's intelligent? Because I guess positioning is going to be really important once you get to that climb again, if it's what we imagine it to be. It's the first look we're going to have of it. Of course, a bit of gravel road, off-road sort of stuff. If you're on your own, though, you'd think you'd be looking after your own opportunities to be in the right place at that time, wouldn't you?
Yep, certainly would. Zana here, the Italian champion, sitting himself at the back of the group. Bike Exchange rider behind him, and he is off to Bike Exchange next season, the Italian champion. And Mark Hirschi here, number 5. Just feathering it a little bit, so not going through full force, just making sure things keep rolling. And they're back in a position now, UAE, after really shaking things up on that last lap around the Latiza circuit. They've got the numbers. Here is Ulissi, further back Davide Formolo, Trentin also in the group.
Now then, what happens? Still a
well,
little
the question
too
is,
much
do
looking
they
around, isn't there?
Yeah, well, do they use those numbers again? They went on a flatter part of the circuit and went on the attack. It was Hirschi, then it was Formolo. And then Trentin used the hill to come across. So UAE have been quite willing to go on the attack.
This time it looked like Ulissi was just following, didn't it? It was Conchi who went. Ulissi followed, looks around. There he is wearing number 2. 84 just behind is Davide Gaburro. And now then, here we go. You talked about it, Robbie, and here it is. It is Matteo Trentin being followed by Vacek. Scaroni wants to be in the move again, as does Formolo. And UAE want to make sure that it's not just the one rider they have up there. It's all about strengthening numbers for them.
Yeah, if you've got the numbers, then you don't want one rider in a group of 4, 5 or 6. Then you always want to be following that next counter-attack, getting the free ride across. But they've been quite willing to go on the attack on the flat. They've looked the strongest uphill, but they've also just been incredibly aggressive right throughout on these laps that we've been doing. So they've left Latiza behind on the way to Diesel Farm. But plenty of attacking on the flatter sections of this course.
It's Oldani this time as we come through Marostica again. And now here she follows.
And already the signal, yep, let's start swapping turns. Everybody go around. He's made a big one-out attack, and immediately the sign, it's even more out there than the flick of the elbow.
Past the Castello Inferiore we come in Marostica. A little bit of road furniture to make sure that you don't just lose a gap on those in front. Everything's still together, though, as there's the look around. Both Vermeersch and Kron representing Lotto. That was Vermeersch on the left-hand side there. Both Alpecin-de-Koning and UAE have attacked in the last couple of moments. This is Conchi who launched the first attack. 12 kilometres to go. And we all know that Jumbo-Visma have been the team that have won more races than anyone else, but UAE can equal them today. Of course, quick step out of a vinyl always up there as well, becoming the big 3 in terms of number of wins this year. Last road race on European soil here. We know that Jumbo-Visma as a team have already finished their activity for this year.
Well, the top of the Diesel Farm comes with around 6 kilometres to go, and the climb itself, again, not all that long. The actual climb itself, 1.3 kilometres, an average gradient of 11%, and a maximum, well, actually hard to tell on this graphic, but something around 14% is the maximum gradient. And it looks like it's off-road all the way up, Rob, if I'm not mistaken from what I've seen.
And more or less all the way down as well, from what I can judge. I mean, we haven't yet seen it on any pictures, because we're just going across and off what we've had in road books and things like that, and profiles, but this is the first time we're going to see it raced, and it's going to be interesting. So off-road up and down, apparently, at what's been named the Diesel Farm, home to the worldwide brand of fashion that comes from this part of the world.
Well, you wouldn't expect too many paved roads on a farm either, would you?
Now then, through the farm gates.
Through the farm
Here
gate.
we go. The Diesel Farm climb, as the dust is kicked up, the final climb of this Veneto Classic, the final climb that's categorised anyway of the European road season. With one little lump on our way into town after this, and you can see the Swiss rider from UAE, remember, looking to equal Jumbo-Visma on all that list of victories this year, is Mark Hirschi. 4 riders from them in. We've already seen that Il Cometa have had riders up there throughout most groups. Just one left in here. Conchi on the right-hand side for Alpecin-de-Koning, and he's desperately trying to fight for the front and spring things out. And, well, it is more like just an off-road climb, isn't it, rather than anything that is producing surprises. But it's hard enough, isn't it, this? Remember, 1.3 kilometres long, 9.6%. And gaps
Oh, definitely
road.
hard enough. Look at the splits happening here already. Mark Hirschi. And is that Conchi?
Conchi left-hand side, yes, in the blue jersey. Italian, who was very, very good on Wednesday in the Giro del Veneto. Alpecin-de-Koning, we talked about teams being good at the start, in the middle of the year, and at the end, like UAE. Alpecin-de-Koning, not necessarily as stage racers, but as stage winners. Now challenging the likes of Quickstep, a team that's done this sort of thing for the last 10 years. And look at Conchi go. We've already seen how good they are off-road in these gravel races we've been having. Gianni Vermeer's the world champion, up there again, 3rd place in Serenissima gravel the other day. And Conchi looking so strong, looking at how to ride, where to ride, and he's finding those sections to try and reduce the risk of a puncture, I guess.
Yeah, getting on that concrete gutter as well on the inside here, so less rolling resistance, a little bit more traction as well. And here comes Formolo. So now 2 riders from UAE chasing the Italian from Alpecin-de-Koning. Formolo goes past Hirschi, and they're up over the steepest part of this climb, but still drags up a little bit more for a while yet, and Hirschi can't follow the wheel of Formolo.
Just under 10 k's to go. Formolo, remember, on home roads, looking to try and catch up, and Hirschi, remember, he was up with Conchi here.
But you see the difference between the two. Is it really that Conchi is able to stay on that concrete strip, riding really close with his pedal next to the gutter, his body next to that sort of open face of hillside that's been cut in, and Formolo always out onto the gravel, and they're just losing a few metres. Now he's more comfortable on that concrete strip, and he's closing the gap.
So we're left with 2 at the front for now. Remember, there's a bit of descending to come at the top of this. This is a wonderful little addition. 10 seconds, we're being told. Proper off-road racing stuff.
A mini Col de Finestre.
It is. Giro d'Italia organisers might be looking at this and getting excited. Route to be announced, remember, tomorrow. You can watch it on our platforms that you usually see the racing on. Plus, you can tell your friends, tune in to the GCN Racing YouTube channel. We'll be announcing some very special things about where you'll be able to watch all of the Italian racing next year. Give you a little clue, just about everywhere.
We just saw Hirschi there. He's also riding on that concrete strip, but he just rode himself into a big pothole and lost a heap of speed, really checked his speed there. Losing traction, saves it. So look how steep that is through that corner. You see him slipping out left, right and centre, Hirschi, but he's got them in his sights. And he's actually coming back to the front of the race.
Good to see some late season form for Mark Hirschi, who hasn't quite discovered that top form in his 2 years at UAE that we saw when he was what was Sunweb, winning those stages in the Tour de France. And it looks as though we're heading for a trio, and look at this. Huge tall trees left and right, gravel roads on the estate of this fashion brand. It's a very Italian scene, isn't it, as we come over the top?
It is, but I tell you what, hold your breath if it's going to be that same sort of marbly gravel all the way down, because this is going to be extremely tricky. They're already having trouble with traction on the uphill. Racing down gradients like that on a gravel road, it's a really a case of risk-reward.
Well, we've been uphill on the diesel farm, going downhill now as Mark Hirschi wants to make his own move here. Looks to try and find that position, but it's not that simple, is it? 9 seconds on the chasers.
Into that right-hander.
All the while, you've got to pray there's no mechanical here.
Yeah, and he should be rating his chances to ride away from the other two and get rid of Conchi on the downhill. So Hirschi, he is a good descender, but it takes one tiny mistake on a descent like this on this on this gravel surface to bring yourself undone. He's opening up the gap. He is taking the risks.
Looks as though the surface was just changing through that corner as well. I'll have a different look, but look at this from on high. Spectacular. Now the first chasers. A bit of a group coming behind. Initial chaser looks to be from Lotto Soudal. Kron, who rejoined the group, remember, as Vermeersch was away. And that surface change, still gravel there. Slightly different shade of it. More, I think, gravel and concrete rather than the earth we had at the top. A different coloured earth. Now a group of, 7-8 riders, including the 19-year-old home rider who we've been talking about in that green jersey, Francesco Busato, from the General Store SZGB team. The man who's going to Intermarché next year, and you suspected it might happen. Hirschi has ridden away.
Yeah, he was intent on getting to the front to take control, and then started taking the risk. You saw just a couple of lengths open up back to Conchi, and he's ridden off into the distance.
Formula's job here, I guess, is just to act as an anchor. So off most of the gravel he comes. It was briefly back onto the normal road. Here he goes, away onto the road again. So the gravel's out the way for Mark Hirschi, who has a narrow lead. So he's been up through the diesel farm, down out of it, and now he's on his way to Bassano del Grappa. One more little launch pad to go that's 500 metres long and at 11.5%. Comes around 5k from the finish, I think.
Well, you'd think at the moment that the winner is going to be decided by Conchi himself. He either gives up the chase on Hirschi and he wins, or he just goes 100% to catch Hirschi and then gets jumped by Formula on that last hill, and then Formula would win. But I think Conchi has found himself in a really difficult position here, and I think he has to almost make the decision to just put everything on everything, see if he can chase down Hirschi and fend off the attack by Davide Formula if and when it comes.
Yet to win his race in his pro career is Nicola Conchi, but he's come close on several occasions. This year he's had a few second and third places in different races in Slovenia, Arctic Race of Norway, top 10 on Wednesday in the Giro del Veneto. Chasing a man, though, who's won at the very highest level. Mark Hirschi, a winner of La Flèche Wallonne, a winner in the Tour de France. But that was in his miraculous 2020, wasn't it? Third in the Worlds that year as well. And on the podium in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He has refound winning form this year, the Tour of Tuscany and in Aargau in Switzerland. Starting the year at Per Sempre Alfredo. It has been a comeback of sorts, and Italy's been very important to Mark Hirschi this year, who's still only 24. He's got 10 seconds now on this group, being led by Nicola Conchi. And as you were just explaining, Robbie, and as you've been explaining throughout the race, the number's so important for UAE.
Yeah, they've played it to perfection, and they've gone at times where the others wouldn't really have expected them to go. They've been in control. They've got some of the strongest climbers in the race, but they've been content to go on the attack on the flat as well and keep everybody guessing at exactly what their tactic's going to be. But Mark Hirschi, he was completely confident with his descending skills. He just had to get himself to the front, get his way past Nicola Conchi, and then he could go flat out on the gravel downhill. And look over the shoulder tells him that it's not over yet. The gap is extending. It was 8 seconds, now we're out to 13 with 5.5 kilometres to go. Hirschi he will not be resting easy just yet. Down into time trial position, as close as you can get to it these days anyhow, with the UCI regulations that are in force. No more hands draped over the handlebars. But it's a mano a mano. And sitting in third position on the road, Davide Formolo, he may at some stage start to think about the podium position and the heat that's coming from behind. And the chase at the moment, last we saw, being led by Andreas Kron of Lotto Soudal.
5Ks to go then. 3 riders at the front, 17 seconds separating the leader and the chasing two. This is that final little climb of the race, uncategorised, but it's where it goes uphill for 500 metres. And here's she climbing in the drops here, one of 3 riders who are set to be, as it stands, the podium. Let's see. If this is to be the podium, none of them will have been born on the day that today's retiree, 51-year-old Davide Rebellin, began his professional career in August 1992. Formolo is now trying to make sure it is a 1-2 on the podium for UAE Emirates. And for those of you who missed it earlier on, yes, Rebellin today ends a 30-year career. 12 teams down that time. He's going to finish today 15 years after his 19th and final Grand Tour. 6 years after his last monument, of which he rode 46, winning in Liège in 2004. At that stage, he said he could see himself doing 3 more years. Well, here we are in 2022, 18 years later, and Rebellin retires behind here, as you've got a young Italian who might be about to join his teammate Mark Hirschi, because Davide Formolo could be up here with an opportunity to win at home if Hirschi can't keep the gap to his teammate.
Yeah, well, we said this was a distinct possibility that Formolo would use up Conchi and go on the attack, and Conchi had no answer. As soon as Formolo went, Conchi looked over his shoulder to say, well, who else is coming? Because third's about as good as I can do today against UAE, who've had everything under control all day long. Now Formolo is trying to ride his way across to Mark Hirschi. 7 seconds the gap at Hirschi. He is holding a really good rhythm, very strong up that climb. A full attack by Formolo up there. You'd think this would stay the order in, unless Hirschi gets the idea that Formolo's on his own and they can ride in with the two of them.
Formolo has him in sight as he looks behind. I mentioned Davide Rebellin. I know a lot of you will be tuning in a little later today. There's been a lot of other cycling to watch, certainly over on the track. And it was at the start of this race that we had that image in the neutral zone of the man they call Rocha here from this region. Formolo riding out the neutral zone with Rebellin, having that long conversation. Rebellin a month older than Jens Vogt and Lance Armstrong, the man who won the Ardennes Triple, but 18 years ago in 2004. And a reminder that 4/5 of this peloton weren't even born when Rebellin won his first pro race in 1992. Rhythm is a Dancer was #1 in the UK when he turned pro, and it was a year before the first internet browser, I should say, was invented, Mosaic. Rebellin has seen so many changes down years, perhaps more than any other rider in the history of this sport. And today, he's going to be part of a race that is going to see 3 young riders taking it to the front. Here is Nicola Conti, who's at 30 seconds now. 23 seconds further up the road is Davide Formolo, and a further 7 seconds up the road from this man is the lone leader Mark Hirschi. 3 kilometres to go for the Swiss. It looks like being a 1-2, unless there is some sort of dramatic change here, Robbie.
Yeah, and I'm not expecting a dramatic change unless someone has a very untimely mechanical. Mark Hirschi, well, obviously not going to wait for Davide Formolo. Just 7 seconds between them, and look over the shoulder, but no easing off on the pedals for the Swiss. He wants to get the win, and as you mentioned before, Rob, off that phenomenal season a couple of years ago when he was riding with Sunweb, wins in the Tour de France, multiple stage wins, had a really tough time last year. He had an injury, he was out with illness. He's finding his form again. It'd be good to see him get back to the form that he showed when he was with the Sunweb team a couple of years ago. But at the moment, Formolo, he's the local man. He'd love to get back up to his teammate and say, hey, listen, what do you think about me winning in the area that I live in? 9
seconds, though, now. It's drifting again. This is a really fascinating internal battle. One thing that looks to be sure now is that it's not just going to be Jumbo-Visma who are the top dogs in terms of wins. We know that down the years, it's certainly for the last decade, also been Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl, hasn't it? They have 47 wins. Of course, they're no longer racing here. Jumbo-Visma have 48 wins. They've ended their season. The team at the front with the 1 and 2 at the minute have 47. Jumbo-Visma are about to be joined right at the top of the tree. We're heading into the very beautiful and scenic Bassano del Grappa. And it's Mark Hirschi who is just over a kilometre away now from taking victory. In fact, 1k to go for the man who is on his way to win number 4 for the season. And this now should be his. Formolo just behind. A man who's worked so hard for his team. In fact, he's become more of a worker, hasn't he, in recent times. Been a while since he was winning big races himself. 2 years since his last win in the Dauphiné. When they come, they're generally big ones. As it's just about held up right there by Hirschi, who's just a few hundred metres from the line now. It's going to come down to this scenic old bridge. And it's one of the most stunning finishes in professional cycling. Through that final corner. Thankfully, we haven't got a big bunch in here because that would be a scary prospect, I think.
Well, he's not holding anything back, is he? I mean, it's been clinical by UAE, but Hirschi, he's gone with them on the climbs, but he's opened the gap up by taking the risks and having the skills on the technical sections of the course. He's going to grab the win.
Mark Hirschi then with one final uphill to the line. 4.5 hours of racing. They've been on 2 different circuits, on all sorts of surfaces, in one of the biggest and most important cycling regions in the world. It has been a spectacular way to end 2022. And right back on the top of things, just as the season ends, is Mark Hirschi as UAE equal the top number of wins this year. Jumbo-Visma have company. And it's also a 1-2 for UAE Emirates as Formolo finishes second. They took control of the race, they destroyed the competition, and they win 2 out of the 2 races. Wednesday was Trentin, today's Hirschi, and you have to give your hat off to Nicola Conci, who could do very little apart from do what he did in the end there. A good ride from him and Alpecin de Koenig. And as the sport says goodbye to Davide Rebellin after a 30-year career, it is a sensational end, an entertaining day in the saddle with Mark Hirschi, the deserved winner. Look at all those UAE jerseys near the top. That could be, well, 4 inside the top 10, 15?
Well, Trentin, he actually came in to punch the air, celebrate the team victory, and Oldani just pipped him on the line, but it looked like Matteo Trentin came across the line in 5th place, I believe.
So certainly 3 in the top 5, and then Ulisi was in that last group there as well. Absolutely sensational stuff. It was an interesting internal battle, wasn't it? There is. Hirschi was out in front. The man they call Rocha was following him behind in Formolo. And the 2022 season in Europe at least ends here. A reminder just before we get into reviewing everything that the Giro d'Italia presentation will be live tomorrow, GCN Plus, Discovery Plus, and for free on the YouTube channel GCN Racing. We'll be telling you all about where you can watch all of our Italian races next year, because I know that it's expanding to all GCN Plus territories. That's good news for those of you who were geo-blocked until now. You'll discover the route of the Giro d'Italia. Plus, there's plenty more to come as we say goodbye to the road season in Europe. There's a couple more days racing in Asia as well with the Tour de Langkawi. Plus, the cyclocross keeps getting bigger and better. More of that to come, including races today. And the UCI Track Champions League begins in just under a month's time. So plenty to be going on with us. We hope that you'll winter well. And we'll be back with you with the road racing in just about no time at all. But there's Hirschi, and, well, no better way to end the season than this, Robbie.
Yeah. Different surfaces all throughout the race, and an absolute clinic, a textbook display by the UAE team, and topped off by Mark Hirschi with a solo win ahead of his own teammate, Davide Formolo. They were all through the top 10, the rest of the team. Trent in 5th, Ulissi up there as well. So it was